So, hello everyone. This is a Git Basics workshop with me, Anna. And basically, the first thing I want to do is just introduce myself. I already kind of told you guys a couple things about where I'm from. I'm gonna give a quick background as to where I'm from and how I ended up doing these kinds of workshops. So, first of all, in terms of geographically where I'm from, I'm actually a European with an American accent. So basically, I was born in Germany, raised in the Netherlands, but my family and parents are Greek. And then I've lived in the UK for 5 years, and then I moved to Barcelona, Spain. So I live here right now. This is where I'm joining you from. And basically, I'm someone that I can hear someone like a background. Anyway,
Could everyone please make sure they are muted? Thank you.
I thought someone was saying something to me. That's why I stopped. But so yeah, so basically, I learned UX design, and that's kind of how I got my start in the tech space. And I worked for a bit as a UX designer in London until I decided I wanted to move to Barcelona. And when I made that move, I decided I wanted to learn to code. So basically, I went to a coding bootcamp here in Barcelona. I learned full stack development, and then I ended up getting a job as a front end developer. And while working as a front end developer, I realized how important it was to know how to use Git. Because in order to work smoothly with your colleagues, you really, especially if you're a big development team, you need to understand how Git works. And in coding boot camps, sometimes you learn it, sometimes because you might be working on projects on your own, you don't learn all the features. So I struggled with using Git a lot. I was really scared of it. I thought I was going to destroy the entire repository whenever I had to do something that I thought was complicated using Git. So I decided to like master it, conquer my fears. And once I did, I realized that a lot of the learning resources out there weren't really user friendly for people coming into tech from non-technical backgrounds. So I decided to start teaching Git in like a user friendly way. So this workshop is based off of an online course that I built. So I hope this workshop helps you guys. It's really, really a basics workshop. It might be a refresher or a review for some of you. So a couple announcements. This might be revision for some of you. If you've used Git before, you might know some of these things, but hopefully I can present things and give you a mental model of things that will give you a couple aha moments and you'll learn something new throughout this workshop. This is also a just watch presentation. It is not a code along presentation. So just sit back, take in the information that I'm going to share with you, and obviously note down any questions. But then again, questions are going to be answered at the end. So I'm going to get through the whole presentation, and then we can have a chat at the end to answer any questions you guys may have. I'll answer to the best of my abilities. Maybe Kimberly will help me. And yeah, lastly, the duration of the workshop is about half an hour. It depends on how fast I'm going to be talking, basically. So it's not too long, but Git is quite an intense topic, and especially when you start learning to code, it helps to get things in small bites. So what we're going to cover in this presentation is what are Git and GitHub exactly, and how are they different? We're going to go over making a commit, but very in depth. I'm going to go over the staging area, very in depth, and then I'm going to touch upon what branches are. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to be uncovering some common misconceptions about Git. These are things that with other students that I've taught, I realize keep coming up over and over again. And what I realize with Git is we often learn things the wrong way and we misunderstand how it works, which can be really difficult because then you don't have a good mental model of how it works. So let's get started. What are Git and GitHub? I often see Git and GitHub being used interchangeably as terms, but they're actually two completely different things. Basically, Git is a program that you install onto your computer, onto your local machine, and it's a distributed version control system. In other words, it's a way to keep track of all the versions of your code and to collaborate with other people. On the other hand, GitHub is really a company that allows you to host your projects that use Git on a remote server somewhere, so in the cloud. So GitHub really is just a company that was smart enough to use the word Git in its name. And to show that really explicitly, I'm going to go into my terminal and I'm going to type in git -- version. And it's basically going to tell me the version of Git that's installed on my computer, because like I mentioned, Git is just a program that you installed on your computer. On the other hand, if I were to type in GitHub -- version, my computer would just say like, I have no idea what this is. I don't know what you're talking about. And that's because GitHub isn't a program installed on our computer. It is a company that allows us to host our projects that use Git in the cloud. So that's the difference. And now I'm going to start with the first part of my presentation, which is about making a commit in depth. So I'm going to go really, really into detail. So when you first start learning Git, you often come across these diagrams. These are from Google Images, and they're a good starting point for starting to kind of understand how to make a commit and how Git works. But I think they're very simplistic in some ways and sometimes can give us the wrong impression of how some things work. So I'm going to be introducing a new mental model of how to think of the different parts of Git. So let's first make, I'm going to go onto my desktop and I'm going to make our project folder, our project directory with the mkdir command. I'm going to pass in the name. So I'm going to call my project novel. And there is our project folder. Just a quick heads up, mkdir stands for make directory. Directory and folder are basically the same thing. They're synonymous terms. So a directory is a folder. So I'm going to go into my project folder, and I'm also going to open it up in our file system. So there we go. Here we have our project folder. And before I go to make my repository, to initialize my repository, I want to quickly point out two different types of files that we have in our computer. We have visible files and we have hidden files. So if I go on to, let's say, my user, I can see that there's all of these folders, but these are just the visible files. I also have hidden files on my computer that I'm not able to see at the moment. But on a Mac, if I press Command-Shift-Dot, then it will show me all the hidden files. And on a Windows computer, I would have to go into the settings in order to be able to see all the hidden files. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to press Command-Shift-Dot. And now what you saw is all of these grayed out files are visible now. And these grayed out files, most of them start with a dot. And these are what we call hidden files. So I'm going to go back to my novel folder. And we can see right now that there's no visible files and there's no hidden files in my project folder. But now we're going to use the very first git command, which is git init. This command is going to initialize our repository. So I'm going to press enter. And what you're going to see is that this .git folder was created in my project folder. So if I open that up, we're going to see a bunch of things in here. Most of them are going to seem like gibberish at the moment, but I'm going to go into what some of these are throughout the presentation. So let's go back to the presentation. What we created up to now is a project folder. And inside that project folder, we've created a .git folder. And now I'm going to quickly distinguish between the two. So the project folder is sort of what represents our working directory. And the working directory is sort of like a workbench space. It's somewhere where you can add files, you can delete files, and you can edit files. On the other hand, that .git folder is sort of what represents our actual repository. And within the repository, there are two spaces that I want to talk about. First is the staging area. The staging area is sort of like a rough draft space. It's the place where we can really craft what we want to include in our next commit. And we can really decide what is ready to be committed and what isn't ready to be committed. On the other hand, we also have the commit history, and that's basically where all our commits live and the interconnections between them. Now, a commit is basically a version of your project. And every commit has a hash of 40 characters of letters and numbers that acts basically like the name for the commit. It's a way to refer to the commit. And this is going to be the very first misconception that we're going to debunk. people often think that commits represent the changes between different versions of their project, but that's false. Every commit is basically a standalone version of your project. Every commit has a reference within it to every file that is part of that version of your project. So that's the first misconception debunked. Commits are not changes. Commits are standalone versions of our project. So let's go and actually add some files to our project, add our first file to our project. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to use the source code editor, Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to open up my novel project folder. We can see right now that there are no files in this project. Also here, there are no files. I haven't added any files yet. But we're going to go and add our first file, and it's going to be chapter 1 of my novel, chapter1.txt. And now I'm going to introduce another command, which is the git status command. And basically the git status command tells us the state of our working directory and the state of our staging area and the difference between the two. So at the moment, if I were to type in git status and press enter, Git is going to tell me there are no commits yet, and that's understandable. We haven't made any commits. And it's going to tell me that there's an untracked file. So in other words, Git is telling me there's a file in your working directory, but this file is not yet being version controlled. It is also telling me that I can git add this file to include in what will be committed, but we'll do that in a second. So if I go back to the presentation, we can see that in our working directory, we have a file, but this file is not yet part of our repository. We have not yet added this file to the staging area, and that's why it is not yet being version controlled at all. Git doesn't really know about it. So the next thing we want to do is to add this file to the staging area so that then afterwards we can include it in what will be committed. So in order to do that, Git is telling us to use the git add command. And we can pass in the name of the file, but in the future, we're probably going to have a lot more things that we want to just add in one go. So we can usually use the dot, which represents our current directory. Now, before I do that, I want to point out that in the .git folder, at the moment, we do not have any file that's called index. But once I add the very first file to our project, I'm going to get a file here that's going to be created that's going to be called index. So git add dot, it's adding the file. And now you can see that this file was created. And basically index is our staging area. So index and staging area are the same thing. So the next thing we, wait, no, let me go back to the presentation. So basically now our file was copied into the staging area. We've added the file to the staging area. And this is where I want to debunk another very common misconception, which is often people think that the file moved from the working directory to the staging area, but that's not the case. The file is copied over from the working directory to the staging area. So it kind of exists in both places, let's say. So yeah, files are not moved from the working directory to the staging area. They're copied from the working directory to the staging area. All right. So the final thing we actually want to do is actually make a commit. In order to make a commit, we're going to use the git commit command. Pass in the -m option, which basically stands for message. And then we pass in a message. Normally, you should give a message of what you've changed in that version of your project. I'm just going to go with first commit. That's not a very descriptive message, so do not follow my example. So I press enter, and Git's going to tell me which branch this commit has been is on. And basically, we're going to go into branches at the latter part of the presentation. It's going to give me the first 7 characters of the commit hash, and it's also going to give me the commit message. And basically, I told you guys that the staging area is represented by the index file. The commit history, where the commits basically live, is represented by the objects folder. So that's what this is. All right, let's go back to the presentation. So now we've created our very first commit. So now I want to go into the staging area in more depth. So we made our first commit, and now we're going to go into more information about the staging area. So a lot of people sometimes think that after you make a commit, your staging area is wiped clean, but that's also a misconception. So at any point in time, you're looking at a version of your project. In other words, at any point in time, you are on a particular commit. And it is the files that are part of that particular commit, that version of your project, that will be in your staging area. So the staging area is not empty. It has all the files that are part of the commit that you're currently on. So I've prepared another project folder, and I've already created a commit in that one. And it has 4 files in it, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go take a look at that. So I've called it novella. Let me go onto my desktop. There we go. All right, we're in novella here. And then let me just, okay, never mind. I need to make make the repository. I'm gonna make 4 files real quickly. txt chapter 2. Just to prepare it. And I'm gonna add them all to the staging area. This is just quickly me preparing for the rest of the presentation. Don't worry that I'm adding chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. So let me just quickly check. Yes. Basically, I have a project folder now, which has 4 files in it, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these are all the first version of those files. I have made a commit. The git log command is basically a really useful command, which allows you to see a list of all the commits in your repository in reverse chronological order. So I have 1 commit in my repository, and it's basically the commit where I added chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I'm gonna see now, if I use the git status command, is that Git is going to tell me on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree clean. What Git is telling me right now is that my working directory and my staging area look exactly the same. I haven't made any new changes after the initial commit that I made, and therefore there's nothing to add to the staging area in order to make another commit. And if I just quickly go back to the presentation, we can see everything here, chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all version 1, and in the staging area, it's the same. So now what I want to do is I want to make some changes to chapters 3 and 4. So in chapter 3, I'm going to pretend that I write some incredible things in my chapter 3, and then I can pretend I write some incredible things in chapter 4. Right now, I'm just adding a bit of text. And now if I use the git status command, Git is going to tell me, okay, now you've made changes to chapters 3 and 4. So in your working directory, you have updated these files, and you need to add these changes to your staging area so that they can be included in what will be committed and therefore will be included in your next commit. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the git add command, pass in the dot, so it just adds them both. And then if I use the git status command again, Git is going to tell me, okay, now these things are in your staging area and they're ready to be committed. So let's go see that. So what we did was we decided that we wanted to work on chapter 3 and 4 of our novella. And so therefore these were updated to become like the second version of these files, for example. Then I decided that I wanted to add these to the staging area so that I could make another commit. So then what you'd see is that in the staging area, the version of that file basically updated. But now what happens if I decide that actually the changes that I made to chapter 4, I'm not yet ready to include those in my next commit. I think I still need to work on that. I don't want there to be like a permanent history of that. So the reason that I mentioned that the staging area is kind of like a rough draft space is because you can add things and remove things in order to really decide, what do I want to include in the next version of my project, in my next commit? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unstage the changes that I made to chapter 4. I'm going to take them out of my staging area. So I'm going to do that using the git reset command, pass in head in capital letters, dash dash, and then the name of the file. So chapter4.txt. And then I'm going to press enter. And right now it's telling me you have unstaged the changes. And if I use the git status command, it's going to tell me, all right, right now you have changes to be committed. So you have chapter3.txt, an updated file in your staging area that would be included in your next commit. But the changes you made to chapter 4 are no longer in your staging area. They're only in your working directory. So the final thing we want to do is we want to make another commit. So git commit -m, pass in a message. I'm going to, once again, not write a really descriptive message, second commit, and press enter. If I do a git log now, it gives me my first commit and my second commit. So let's go see that in the diagram. Basically what I decided was the chapter 4 changes, I wanted to unstage them. And so that file reverted back to the file that was part of this commit initially. And then I made a second commit. All right, so now I want to get into branches. And I think branches are one of the biggest misunderstood topics in Git. So we're going to focus on these 2 commits that we've made. And in order to talk about branches, I'm going to go into the .git folder. Then I'm going to go into this folder called refs. Inside that folder, there's a folder called heads. And inside there, there's a file called master. I'm going to click into that file because I want to find out what is a branch. All right, so this file called master has a 40-character hash stored inside it. So at the end of the day, a branch is a pointer to a commit. And master is currently pointing to this commit. And this commit hash is exactly the same as this one. In other words, it's the commit we just made, that second commit. It starts with 4E65, so 4E65. And what we can see is that next to this commit hash, there's parentheses and there's the word master. So in other words, master is pointing to this commit. So if you want to visualize that in the diagram, basically master is like a pointer to a commit. So huge misconception debunked. Branches are actually not like tree branches. I think a lot of people see a lot of diagrams that suggest that, or in their mental model, they think that, but branches are actually pointers to commits. So if we go back to desktop, another command that we can use in order to see all the branches in our repository is git branch. So right now we only have 1 branch in our repository. Master is just the initial branch that Git creates when you create a repository. And in order to make another branch, we can use the git branch command and then pass in the name of a branch that doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to call it feature 1. And then I'm going to press enter. And what we're going to see is that another file will be created in this folder. So pressing enter, and we can see that feature 1 was created. Let's check what's in there. So feature 1 also has a commit hash, and basically it's the exact same commit that master is pointing to. And it's that second commit again. So now if I type in git log, we can see that in those parentheses, it has master, but it also has feature 1. In other words, whenever you make a branch, that branch will be pointing to the commit that you're on when you made that branch. So in the diagram, it basically looks like just another pointer to that same commit. All right. So throughout this presentation, we've been seeing this thing called head, but head in capital letters. So what exactly is head? Let's click into that. So we can see that head is a reference and it's pointing to master. So in other words, in the refs folder, in the heads folder, it's pointing to this master file. So basically what head is it's telling us which which branch we're currently on. So at any given point in time, you're on a particular branch. And right now we're on branch master. Also here, you can see that we have master and we literally have head pointing to it. So keep in mind, we made the feature one branch, but just because you make a branch doesn't mean that you go onto that branch or that you switch into it. You actually have to do that explicitly. So right now we're still on master, and in the diagram, that just looks like head pointing to master. So we're on the master branch. In order to switch branches, we have to use a command called git checkout. And then we pass in the name of the branch that we want to switch into. So if we want to switch into the feature one branch, we're going to say feature one, press enter. It's telling us that it's switched to feature one. If we click into head again, now it's changed. Now it's referencing feature one. And if I type in git log, we can see that now head is pointing to feature one instead of master. So let me just quickly go back to the presentation. Basically, head had just moved and points to feature one now. So the last thing we want to do maybe is to add another commit. And basically, because we've made changes to that chapter 4 file, we actually have something in our working directory that we can add to the staging area and then include in our next commit. So if I type in git status, Git's going to tell me that I've made changes to the chapter 4 file that are in my working directory, but not in my staging area. So I'm going to add those changes to my staging area. If I type in git status, Git will tell me you've added them to your staging area. And finally, I'm going to make my last commit. Then I'm just going to call it third commit. Press enter. And now if I type in git log, I will see that now my feature one branch is pointing to this latest commit that I just made now, this third commit. But my master branch is still just pointing to my second commit, this one. So that just shows that whenever you make a commit, it's the branch that you're currently on when you make that commit that updates to point to the latest commit. So let me just go back here. So we made a commit, and then the feature one branch updated to point to that latest commit. So that was basically it. That's the end. That's just a very brief introduction to some basics about how commits are made. What is the working directory? What's the staging area? What's the commit history? And what really represents your repository? And what branches really are. So branches are just pointers to commits. Knowing that will really help you in your mental model with Git, because a lot of people, like I mentioned, think that they're tree branches. So we covered, Git versus GitHub, the difference between the two, making a commit in depth, the staging area in depth, and branches. I have a couple links that I will share in the chat, because basically, like I mentioned, this workshop is based on an online course that I built, which goes into more detail, like more about branches, more about merging. It goes into how to push to remote repositories, how to fetch code from remote repositories, like how to work with GitHub or other remote repositories, and also rebasing. So I will leave that link just in case anyone really liked the way that I explain things, because that might be helpful. The course is also translated to French and Hindi. I don't know if I should share the French and Hindi. If anyone wants those links, I'll share those as well. And then basically the first 8 lessons of all the courses are on YouTube for free. So you can go check those out if you want. I'll share my YouTube link. And if anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, they can do so. I'll share all these links in once I stop sharing my screen, basically. And also just a heads up, if anyone is looking for a junior front-end developer, I'm looking for opportunities. So if anybody knows of any teams or any interesting projects, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can see everyone. And I'm going to see if there's any questions, if there's anything
We've
I
had
was
a few
unclear.
questions come in, and I've made a note of them so that they didn't get lost in the chat. So
okay,
yeah, thank you so much for that. The diagrams were particularly, really useful. I think diagrams really give a really nice visual idea of how things work, particularly with Git branches and stuff. So yeah, that was super useful. Thank you. So I'm just so our first question. Someone has said, I'm still a bit confused about what head is.
Okay. So basically in Git, you can have multiple branches, and the reason you make branches is because you want to, well, I mean, I'm not going to say this is the only reason, but in general, you make them so you can work on different things at the same time, or so that different people can work on different things. So head just tells you when you're on your computer, which branch you're currently on. So kind of which feature you're working on, or which part of your code you're basically looking at. So yeah, I mean, honestly, the best thing with Git is to just play around with it, and then you'll start understanding it a lot better. But basically you can switch from one branch to another branch, and head will just tell you which one you're on at the current moment in time. But it's head in capital letters. There's a difference between head and lowercase letters and capital letters.
I'm going to share a resource now, and it's got a swear word in it. It's called Oh Shit Git. And it's such a good explainer. Like literally the first thing is, oh shit, I did something terribly wrong. Tell me Git has a magic time machine. And it'll then say, cool, here's how you go back. And it's such a good resource for explaining a situation non-technically, as in like, oh shit, I've lost a file. How do I get it back? So the word shit is said a hell of a lot. But it's an incredible resource, and I've just shared it.
Awesome.
The next question, how would you recover a file from an old commit?
How would you recover a file? Honestly, off the top of my head, I wouldn't know how to answer that. I mean, I think you have to, so from an old commit, I would probably just check out that commit. And from there, you can, I mean, I guess if you deleted it and you've gone a few commits, you can just copy the file. Because basically every commit is a standalone version of the project. So you just need to go to the commit that you still had that file and copy it over to your current project, basically. I think that's one way. I don't know, Kimberly, if you have another way that you would.
I wouldn't use the terminal for this. I would have just gone into GitHub, because you get a really visual, like if you look on GitHub, you can see all of your commits. If you've got 5 commits in your pull request, you can literally just click on that commit and it will show you what you've committed in that file, and ones, in the following one, it may be that you've deleted it. So then you could literally just click that commit, you'll see it in your browser, and you could just copy the contents of that file and then add it to your commit. That's how I would do it, because terminal would confuse me in that situation.
I was thinking more just using your source code editor, but basically the same thing. Do it in a visual way.
Next question. In regards to branches, when you commit using a different branch other than master, do you still have to merge?
Oh, that just completely depends on the team that you're working with, what sort of processes you guys have. I mean, assuming that master is your guys' main development history, the main thing that you guys are working on, at some point, if you want your work to be included, then I guess you would have to merge your branch into master. But that just fully depends on how your team works.
Cool, perfect. I'm just trying to note down all the questions coming in so that we don't lose them in the chat. Okay, next question. Can you go back to a different branch and do a new commit?
Yes. Yeah. You can do that at any point in time. Whenever you make a commit, the branch will just update to point to the latest commit. But yeah, and you can go back to any random commit and make a branch pointing to it. Branches are really just like a pointer to a commit. They're really not, I don't know. I think we have in our minds that they're like this heavy thing with like all these commits attached to them, but really they're not, which is mind blowing sometimes.
Someone's just shared, said source tree is also a useful tool for visualizing when you're switching between branching and staging changes. So yeah, source tree is a good one. Next question. When integrating cPanel in GitHub, do you copy all files from cPanel into the appropriate repository prior to commencing version control?
I don't know what cPanel is. I've never used that. Am I like?
Yeah, my awareness of cPanel is I've used it on old like server controllers and like managing my domains, I guess, and then you go into each domain with a cPanel. That's my knowledge of it, but I haven't used that in a while because of things like Heroku and Vercel and stuff like that. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, me neither.
Sorry
Google.
about that. Yes, we'll try to find it out for you. And okay, next question. Can you clarify the difference between Git status and Git log?
Okay, yes. So Git status tells you the state of your working directory and your staging area and whatever differences there may be between the two. Whereas Git log is basically going to give you a list of all the commits in your repository in reverse chronological order. So yeah, those are the two things. I would recommend, just practicing using them a lot, and they'll start becoming, I mean, the thing with Git is there's no point in learning everything by heart, especially like all the commands and all the different flags and everything. You're never gonna, I don't know everything by heart. Like I'm never gonna learn everything by heart. It's just about getting a good mental model of how it works and then figuring out how to put the puzzle pieces together when you need them and knowing how to basically go to the documentation and read. The best resource, well, if you really want to deep dive, there's Pro Git, which is like the Bible of how Git works. But yeah, no, so that. End of answer.
Cool, thank you. Next question. Will this be recorded somewhere for us to rewatch?
Yes.
Yes. So we've, I did share one earlier on in the chat, but we are going to, we are recording this and it's going to go up onto the Codebar YouTube channel, which I will share a link to now.
Yeah, so, I'm also going to share some links because I forgot to share all the ones I said I was going to share.
Well, maybe what you could do is if you send them to me, I can send out an email to everyone because we'll lose this chat afterwards, and maybe I'll construct
okay, yeah, after this. I'll send a couple in here in case anyone wants them right now, and then otherwise I'll send them as well to Kimberly. So that the first to send them in the email because then it's easier for everyone to keep track. So I'm just sending the Git course in English, the YouTube channel. And well, if anyone wants to connect with me on basically on LinkedIn, then I'll send my LinkedIn as well. Always happy to connect with anyone. And what else? I have like a link tree. I'll send that as well. There's like a bunch of links. Anyway, so let's see what else. Will you be doing any more of these workshops? People have been asking me, so I feel like I should prepare some. I need to prepare them though, because presentations, animations take time for preparation.
Yeah.
And practice. So go on, Kimberly, if there's more questions.
Next question. Are there some kind of standard best practice for when to make a commit?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of different opinions on this. I have absolutely no opinions. I am actually quite a junior developer. I don't have like 10 years of experience. So it really depends on the developer themselves, the team. Maybe, once you join a development team or a company, they might have like particular practices. They might even have practices on like what your commit message should be, or like how they should be structured. It really depends. That's my answer. I guess sometimes people just want to include like the relevant things in one commit, like the relevant things for one feature or for one thing that you're working on. But yeah, it depends. Kimberly, I don't know if you have something you want to say on.
I'm a believer, the more you commit, the better. And you can always amend a commit. There's a command called git commit -- amend. So like a lot of the time, if I like do a commit and then I realize that there's a typo, like I don't really want a whole commit to be fixing a typo. And like a lot of jobs, like a lot of companies go on about like a clean Git history. And so you don't really want commits that say fix typo or like you don't want a message that also says fix bug, because that's not useful. And so, yeah, you can always amend any commit afterwards anyway. And so, yeah, there's a command called git commit -- amend that lets you amend, you know, your commit. So I tend to do it like, oh, this is in a good place, it's working. And then I'll do my commit. And then I'm like, cool, I've added a little bit more commit until I'm like, okay, that's one good solid commit. And then I'll start going on to like my next Git like history. Okay. Next question, can you rename the comment in a commit once you have hit return, e.g. rename first commit?
Yeah, you can with, I think the git commit amend, wait, and there's also like interactive rebase.
Yeah.
So yes, you can. I don't, let me think. Yeah. You can totally amend. And I've done that plenty of times.
Yeah, and then there's little flags you can add like git commit -- amend -- no edit if you don't want to amend the commit message, or you can just do it without the no amend, and that will let you change the commit message.
Yeah.
Can you create a new branch and copy the one you want to recover and commit?
I don't think I get the question.
Yeah, can you create a new branch and copy the one you want to recover and commit? I'm not sure.
So basically, if you're on a branch and you make another branch, it's going to be pointing to the same commit that you were on the previous branch, basically. So it's like you have two branches pointing to the same commit. It's basically like you copied, but you just have two. And then you can, whichever branch you decide to go on, the next commit, that branch will point to the next commit.
Someone has said, what does it mean to amend a commit? So it means that, yeah, like I said, if you've committed a piece of work and then you realize, oh, I've done a typo, you can add that typo to that previous commit. And yeah, I thought a commit is pretty much final. No, you can amend any commits.
And there's also something called rebasing, which is complicated, but also can change things. But just be careful with changing things.
Next and final question, I think, unless no one's got any more, is it recommended that beginner use GitHub and not Git to start, then work up to commands on terminal?
Oh, so this goes back to whoever asked this. I'm going to make you go back to the recording and listen to the first part of the presentation, because basically Git and GitHub are completely different things. They're so basically you have to use Git. You don't have to use the terminal though. You can use as someone mentioned, a GUI, a graphical user interface. So basically a program that makes it more visual. But Git is the actual version control system that does the version control, and GitHub is just like it's like Google Drive. It's like somewhere where you can just upload it to the cloud, kind of. It's an analogy, guys. Don't take it too seriously. But yeah, it's just a place where you can upload it to the cloud, and then people can like download it. Fetch your code. But you need to learn both. You don't need to learn GitHub though. You can use another. GitHub is just one of several companies. There's sometimes we forget because GitHub is so widely used, but there are other companies that allow you to host your projects that use Git.
A really popular one is Bitbucket, which integrates really well with like Jira, which is like a Kanban project manager, which is I've used Bitbucket more in a work environment than I have GitHub, I think because it's cheaper. And if you've got like thousands and thousands of people, Bitbucket is, and it's exactly the same commands in terminal that Anna was doing. It's just a different, front end interface.
Yeah. There's also GitLab, I think, which is open source, I think.
Yeah. So, and someone said there's GitHub Desktop now, which substitutes the terminal. It's quite cool.
Yeah. The most important thing with Git is just to get a good mental model of how it works. That's the most important. I mean, it's not important that you're like, I have to use the terminal or I have to use this. It's like, understand how it works and what it does. And then it's up to you to choose whether you're going to use the terminal or a GUI or anything else. But the basics are really, really helpful to understand.
Cool. Cool. Well, I think we managed to answer everyone's questions. So yeah, thank you so much, Anna, for, you know, coming in and doing this to everyone. I think it's one of our biggest virtual workshops.
Well, I'm very flattered that so many people wanted to learn about Git.
Yeah.
Attend. And if anyone has any feedback, please reach out, tell me. To be fair, I've done this presentation a couple times, so I think it's about time I do a improvement session, you know, upgrade the slides, add clarify things that maybe I'm not saying very clearly. So any feedback is really, really appreciated.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you, Anna, for running this. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Yes. Thank you.
Bye.